I'm going to model how to use trig identities to find a value. This can be a very difficult subject, so I'm going to try to go as slow as possible and give you as many ways to do something as I can, go with the easiest. What's going to happen is you're going to need to understand all the trig identities. So we have reciprocal identities, quotient identities, Pythagorean identities, odd-even identities, and we have cofunction identities. And we've used most of these. We've mostly used reciprocal and quotient identities, and that's what we're going to continue to use. So for this problem, I'm going to be given some information. I want to be given that the secant of theta is equal to 6. And I'm also going to be given that the sine of theta is going to be less than 0. So the first thing I want to do is I want to figure out what quadrant this angle must be in. Well, I know the secant theta is positive in the first and the fourth quadrant. So it's got to be either here or here. I know the sine of theta is negative in the third and fourth quadrant. So the only way that this can occur is if we're using the fourth quadrant. So everything I'm talking about is now going to be in the fourth quadrant. I always start with the easiest. If I'm given that the secant theta is equal to 6, the easiest thing for me to find would be cosine theta. And I'm going to use the reciprocal identity to find that. So my reciprocal identity states that cosine theta is the inverse or the reciprocal of secant theta, so that I know that the cosine theta is 1 over 6. So that's the first one I want to find. So cosine theta is equal to 1 over 6. And that should make sense because cosine theta has to be less than 1. For me, the next easiest one to find would be sine theta using the Pythagorean identity. So Pythagorean identity states that sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta is equal to 1. Well, I have the cosine theta. Cosine theta is 1/6, so I'm going to replace that in this equation. So I have sine squared theta plus 1/6 squared is equal to 1. This gives me sine squared theta plus 1 over 36 equals 1. I'm going to subtract 1 over 36. So I'm going to have sine squared theta is equal to 1 minus 1 over 36. Get a common denominator, I'd have 36 over 36 minus 1 over 36. So sine squared theta is equal to 35 over 36. Now I take the square root of both sides. So sine theta is equal to plus or minus the square root of 35 over 6. This is saying plus or minus. It could be positive or negative. But let's go back to the beginning and look. I'd stated that it was in the fourth quadrant. And we were given that sine theta was 0. So it's not going to be a positive value. We want the negative value. And that does make a huge difference. So I'm going to have negative square root of 35 over 6. So I've been given my secant theta. I have already found my cosine theta and my sine theta. So I need to find 3 more. For me, the next easiest one to find would be tangent of theta. So I'm going to find tangent of theta using a quotient identity. The quotient identity states that the tangent of theta is equal to sine theta over cosine theta. So I have sine theta, which is negative square root of 35 over 6, and I have cosine theta, which is 1 over 6. When I divide complex fractions, it's going to be negative square root of 35 over 6, and divided by 1/6 is the same thing as by multiplied by 6 over 1. My 6 is reduced, so negative square root of 35 over 1, so tangent of theta is equal to negative square root of 35. I have 4 of the 6 now. Once again, I'm going to do the easiest way I can. I'm going to use the reciprocal identity to find my cotangent. So reciprocal identity for cotangent would be cotangent of theta is equal to 1 over tangent of theta. So cotangent of theta is equal to 1 over negative square root of 35. I'm going to rationalize the denominator, which gives me cotangent of theta is equal to negative square root of 35 over 35. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So remember, I have secant. I have one more to find. I'm going to find the last one, which is cosecant of theta. So to find cosecant of theta, there's a lot of ways I can do it. I'm still going to do the easiest. Cosecant of theta is going to be the reciprocal of sine theta. So I'm going to use a reciprocal identity. Cosecant of theta is equal to 1 over sine theta. So cosecant of theta is going to equal negative 6 over the square root of 35. I'm going to rationalize the denominator, so I get cosecant of theta is equal to negative 6 square root of 35 over 35. There's my answer. Then what I would do is I would go ahead and check with the right triangle. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw the coordinate plane. Once I draw the coordinate plane, I have to remember that I'm using the fourth quadrant. So I'm going to put this in the fourth quadrant. Theta will be here. And I was given secant equals 6. So if secant equals 6, that means that the hypotenuse is 6 and the adjacent side is 1. Use Pythagorean theorem, 1 plus this side squared is equal to 36. So this side would be equal to the square root of 35. And when I look at the location, it's going down, so I know it's negative. So when I look at this, I can see that my sign is negative square root of 35 over 6. And that's what I had up here. I can see that my tangent is negative square root of 35 over 1. That's what I have here. My cotangent would be 1 over negative square root of 35, and then I rationalized it, got it here. And my cosecant would be 6 over negative square root of 35, and I rationalized it and got it here. So these are the most popular ones to use. I hope that helps.